Hello and welcome back to the DNB TV studio at the Center Court at the ONS 2016. We're here with Torbjørn Kjus, the analyst of oil in the DNB markets, and the chief economist in Statoil, Eirik Wærnes. Welcome to you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
First of all, let's settle this once and for all. What do you think will be the price of oil when we look at the end of 2016?
So the end of this year, we have a forecast of $55 per barrel for Q4. I never publish a end of the year forecast, but sometimes you just have informal bets on it. But I haven't entered any such bets this year. But $55 is our formal Q4 forecast.
All right.
Yeah.
And what do you think, Eirik?
Well, representing an oil company, I have to be careful what I think in terms of the exact oil price. But from now on and into 2017, we're going to see a gradual increase.
Yeah.
You might have short-term surprises on the downside, but it's going to gradually increase because the market is starting to tighten. And 55 sounds like a relatively good forecast. So,
Yeah.
and I don't give exact forecasts on exact dates.
No. Well, I understand. But you both think the oil price will gradually increase a bit.
Yes, and the key issue for me is the supply side and the swing that we're seeing there. We're seeing a non-OPEC supply growth record high 2 years ago, 2.5 million barrels per day. This year on track to fall maybe 7, 8, 900,000 barrels per day. So that swing of 3.4 million barrels per day is the key to what's going on, and is the number one reason why the market, supply demand wise, is now in balance according to the IEA.
Yeah.
And when I looked at the total supply side, looking at 106 countries, which is in the IEA database, I see that right now we have 60 countries with falling production.
All right.
1 year ago, the number was 45 countries.
Okay.
And the number of the market share or the volume exposed for countries with decline has gone up from 25 to 45 million barrels. So we're starting to see the decline rates materializing. And that's the number one reason to be optimistic to the price into the next 2 years, I would say.
Are we actually now seeing the effects of the low oil price in terms of lower investments in new production?
Yeah, I think we're seeing the end of sources of new supply. And it's going to take a while before you get a lot of new projects decided upon and then coming into production. At the same time, on the other side of the equation, in spite of relatively moderate economic growth, oil demand is growing. And it's growing by somewhere between 1 and 1.5 million barrels per day per year as well. So fundamentally, yes, it's we see the impact of the low oil price both on the demand and the supply side. We have seen the end of a lot of projects that were decided when the price was very high, which takes some years before they start coming into production. And now fundamentally it should start to tighten. Very often the price doesn't follow the fundamentals, and that's one of the key issues, is that even if the price should go up, it might not, because there are other factors that are playing in there. And one of the key uncertainties is that there is so much oil in storage that even though supply exceeds demand in a few weeks or months, the markets might say that, well, we have quite a bit of oil in storage yet, so it might take a while before it starts coming up. But on the other hand, if the market sees that there's hardly any spare production capacity left, we're going to have continued geopolitical unrest, we might have more supply disruptions, then the market might get really worried and you get spikes, which are also not according to the fundamentals. The fundamentals is that it's going to increase slowly.
Yeah. So do you also think that the low price scenario that we are in now is a more of a structural change?
Well, compared to the $100 to $120 range, I think that's too high for the market, and particularly after we've seen now the last 2 years removal of subsidies in many large consuming nations like India, like Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, but also Middle Eastern countries like Kuwait, like the Emirates, like even Saudi Arabia removing subsidies.
So they actually stopped subsidizing
Petroleum. Not
and
stopped,
No,
but reduced.
reduced the subsidies.
for people that need to buy fuel for their cars.
Yeah, exactly. So that means we think that the price will be more. It's going to be more price elastic demand side in the next time the price goes up compared to the first time the price went up, because then the state budgets took the hit.
Yeah. So
But
there
now
are
the
less
consumers. Yes, it should be more like a little bit more like what's going on in the US, which is the most, of course, price elastic. Nowhere near the US, of course, but a little bit more similar.
Yeah.
So that means $100 oil is not going to go together with 1.5 million barrels per day demand growth, we think. So as long as you think the price is going up, you should build in weaker demand growth, basically.
Yeah,
that's what
which
we've
means
done.
you hit equilibrium at a slightly lower price than what you otherwise
Yes,
would have. Right?
yes.
So you think that we will not get back to a stable level above $100 a barrel?
Well, I don't think so, but there's different opinions. I'm not sure what you guys, if you have a long-term.
Yeah, we do, but I can't tell you what it is. But it's of course. I mean, the key uncertainty is, of course, what is ultimately the marginal cost of producing the last barrel, which is what you need to be able to produce. And if you think demand at some point is going to be 100 million barrels or 110, if you go very far out and you look at some forecasts, then what do we need in terms of an oil price to be able to deliver that? And when you look at decline rates and you look at the need to replace, oil is a fundamental challenge. On the other hand, we see that the current cost developments, the current technological changes that we're seeing as a consequence of the low oil price, some of that is going to be structural and have long-term impacts. And then where that balance is going to be in terms of producer price for oil, it's going to be above what we have today, and it's probably going to be below the top we had in 2008 at 140, right? So and then it's hard to. A long-term equilibrium for the oil price has never been there. Right? We have a price level, and then the price fluctuates, and then you have five-year periods where it might increase, and then you have a 5-year period when it goes down. So it's so in that range. But yes, there are things happening on the demand side that indicates that what used to be a stable price is not that anymore. It has to be lower than that. So
and in terms of the structural changes that we see and transition, which is the theme for the ONS conference, you were talking about renewables, and also you were talking about the climate change goals and reduction goals that has been set. And from what you said, at least in the paper, Torbjørn, it doesn't seem likely that we will reach our targets.
Well, when you look at the numbers and you see that 86% of the primary energy is now oil, gas and coal. Oil is 32.9%, and it actually took market share last year. After 15 years of decline, oil took market share last year. And we note that even if you're negative to GDP growth, let's say GDP growth is falling from 3.4% to 3% the next 20 years. And then you have energy intensity, which used to be 0.6, 30-year story, and then cut that in half to 0.3. And you put in a falling market share for oil at half a percentage point every year next 10 years, you still have demand growth. You still have 500,000 barrels per day demand growth. So that means you have to be even more negative on these input factors, and it's very hard to believe that everything is going to be affected that negatively for oil in the next 10 years. So that's what I'm saying, that oil demand growth the next 10 years is probably given for the next 10 years. After that, a lot of things can happen, and I think by 2030 you could have the influence of electrical vehicles, which should start to be felt, but it's too early for 2025. When I look at the scenarios and look at electrical car sales, for example, even 17 times higher car sales in 2025 than now, it's only a bump stealing into oil. 500,000 barrels per day I get to. And I get 2% of the fleet being electrical by 2025, even with very aggressive sales. So it's more like a 2030 to 2040 issue, I would say, with the potential to basically stop oil demand from growing. So that means if oil demand is growing the next 10 years, oil supply also needs to grow.
Yeah.
And how do you get supply to grow? You have to invest.
Yeah.
And what does it take to invest? It takes a price that gets people to invest.
Yeah.
Yeah. How do you look at this?
No, we have also developed 3 scenarios, and one of them is consistent with the 2-degree target, with reducing global CO2 emissions by 45% to 2040, and of course it's a fantastically challenging scenario. It's basically a revolution, both in energy policy and in some technological developments. And even in that scenario, where we actually do reach the 2-degree target, and by the way, in that scenario we have 90% of global vehicle sales in 2040 being electric.
2040.
In 2040, rapid change. It's a rapid change from 2025 and onwards. And then, so it's sort of a flip. I mean, once the electric vehicle wins, why would anybody buy an electric anything else, right? So, but even in that scenario, we have roughly the same amount of oil and gas needed or demanded in 2040 as we do today. Less oil, so it's roughly the same gas, slightly less oil, and then so in total almost the same. And that's within a scenario which has $150 per ton in global carbon price. So it's a huge challenge. A lot of the debate about sort of the impact of electric vehicles, so some of the technological changes that we see, the 3D printing, whatever it is, the debate is as if that is going to kill oil demand. It is, but only at the margin. This is, and what Torbjörn, I completely agree. I mean, this is a question of whether you stop the growth in oil demand or not. It's not about declining demand. So if demand stays at 95 million barrels per day, you know that we'll lose somewhere between 4 and 5 million barrels per day every year in decline. That has to be replaced. Also in a case where demand is flat. And the underlying tendency is for demand to grow by somewhere between 700,000 and 1.5 million barrels per day, depending on policy. So this is about stemming growth. It's not about declining demand. In order to decline demand, it's really big changes that need.
I would even say, even if demand starts to fall, you have to make sure that it doesn't fall twice as fast as the supply side, because that's also a problem. So
yes,
it's even, it's going to be a long tail probably. That's what I think. So investments still have to be done to make sure that supply is not falling quicker than demand. But just looking at these numbers and putting it into graphs and looking at pictures probably tells more than words. And I would ask people, take a look at the pictures. What it needs to happen to the energy space and market share of the different input factors, and you'll be shocked.
Yeah. No, in our 2-degree scenario, where we do reach the target, which is not very realistic. It's possible, but it's not very realistic. And we have a 17 doubling of electricity production from solar and wind by 2040. 17 times what we have today. Huge increase. But in addition, we have needed investments in new oil and gas being twice as much in energy terms. We have to find or develop, or both, oil and gas, which is twice as much in energy terms as the new renewable electricity. So this is about a lot of investments needed in both oil and gas and new electricity. It's not one or the other. And then you could question whether in the current regime or current climate or current economic circumstances, who is going to invest in all of this?
Who is going to invest?
And also carbon capture, who's going to subsidize that in today's weak economic climate? Which, that could have saved the day.
Yeah.
But it looks way too expensive right now.
Well, actually we're closing in on this conversation. Very interesting aspects from both of you. We'll definitely hear more about this going forward. So I'll just say thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.